tiempo lo dirá. No dudes de mí. Es complicado de entender si tú no estás ahí. No puede amanecer. Que algún día volveré, el tiempo lo dirá. No dudes de mí. Es complicado de entender si tú no estás ahí. No puede amanecer.
Hello? Hello? Good morning, everyone. Thanks for being here at the Second International Convention of English Teaching and Learning. English Teaching, Learning, and Technology, sorry. Well, yesterday we had the talk of Marta del Ángel Castillo, our keynote speaker. Then professors from different universities presented interesting projects in studies. For example, exploring the ideas of an ESP-oriented curriculum in Chile, about virtual reality, the use of Flipgrid to promote speaking confidence and fluency, and the intercultural approach in language teaching. So please, we are going to ask you to silence your mobile phones to start with today's presentations.
Good morning. The first presentation is in charge of Coritza Subero. She is the head of the Teaching English program of Universidad Autónoma de Chile here in Talca. She holds a PhD in linguistics from Universidad Católica de Valparaíso, a master's degree in English linguistics from Complutense de Madrid from Spain. Her areas of specializations are applied linguistics, systematic functional linguistics, design of didactic materials for teaching English for specific purposes, educational technology, and discourse analysis. She has more than 15 years of teaching experience at different levels here in Chile, Venezuela, and Spain, and has participated in national and international conferences and seminars related to the use of technological resources in education, the use of interactive multimedia programs in the teaching of English grammar in high schools and universities. The name of her presentation is New Technologies in Teaching Training in English, Evidence in Times and Confinement and challenges facing the integration of artificial intelligence in Chilean classrooms. Okay, let's welcome her.
Yeah, thank you. This presentation is not going to be in English, it's going to be in Spanish. And it is more for innovation, the things that we need to establish for our pedagogical purposes. Nuestra lengua materna y la base pedagógica es esencial en nuestra enseñanza del idioma. Ustedes dirán, es un congreso justamente de enseñanza del idioma inglés. Es un congreso justamente en donde la única presentación que está marcada en español es de la profesora Coritza. Es de esta docente que justamente viene a hablar no solamente de cómo lograr el aprendizaje o la enseñanza del idioma a través de la tecnología, sino justamente toda esa base pedagógica que debe estar para la implementación de la tecnología. Y cuán integrados nos sentimos para con ello. No solamente el conocimiento que podamos tener de una u otra herramienta, sino cuán integrados o cuán adheridos al uso de estas tecnologías estamos. Eso justamente es lo que voy a presentar el día de hoy y espero toda la intervención que puedan para llevarlo a discusión. Justamente el tema, las nuevas tecnologías, no llamarlo tecnología como tal. Como sabemos, la tecnología puede ser desde un lápiz, desde un martillo, de cualquier elemento que haya creado el hombre. Pero tenemos que estar marcados a el uso de estas nuevas tecnologías para la formación de este profesorado y que va justamente a la enseñanza de una segunda lengua o de una lengua extranjera. También lo que ha pasado con esta integración durante el confinamiento del COVID y cuál ha sido nuestra adherencia o el mantenernos en contacto con estas tecnologías con un fin pedagógico después de haber pasado ese confinamiento. ¿Cuánto realmente quedamos adheridos a su uso o cuál ha sido esa reacción de no usarla por la parte emocional? Y los nuevos desafíos que estamos ahora con la inteligencia artificial. Dentro de nuestra agenda está un poco abordar, por supuesto, a qué nos referimos con normalización del uso de la tecnología en la educación, cuáles han sido las nuevas tendencias, realmente hasta qué punto estábamos enterados de elementos o tecnologías emergentes como la inteligencia artificial. Estos factores que por supuesto inciden en lograr la normalización o la integración. ¿Hasta qué punto estamos trabajando para una obtención o el logro de esta ODS 4, que es educación de calidad, hacia una inclusión y diversificación? Hemos establecido algunos objetivos, todavía es una investigación que estamos en pie de lucha, pero que por supuesto a través de cierta metodología ya tenemos algunos avances de hallazgos. No es algo que hemos empezado a hacer ahora, sino que ya desde el mismo 2021 hemos tratado de recolectar datos. ¿Qué es la normalización? Justamente podemos hablar de integración, del conocimiento, de las tecnologías, pero ¿cómo nos llevamos justamente a que esto nos sintamos enteramente integrados? Realmente tenemos que abordar elementos esenciales como la aceptación, el reconocimiento, cómo sé realmente que yo no solamente conozco una herramienta, sino que la puedo implementar y de manera efectiva. Cómo las instituciones lo han estado implementando con nuestras estrategias y nosotros en las aulas. ¿Qué disponibilidad existe para la utilización de estas herramientas? ¿Realmente existe una colaboración entre los docentes para su utilización o lo dejamos solamente como un aprendizaje autónomo y que en tu clase lo puedas desempeñar evaluando por ti mismo la efectividad y no de un uso colaborativo entre los docentes? ¿Realmente estamos en mira de la satisfacción de las necesidades de los aprendices solamente para el logro del C1? ¿O estamos justamente marcando de que sea equitativo el logro del C1 con la parte pedagógica, con el desempeño y la creación de nuevos materiales y no justamente la utilización de lo ya existente? Justamente varios autores desde inicios de este siglo están en marcas de estos 7 escenarios, 7 etapas que ellos han establecido para la integración, pero que nosotros de alguna manera estamos tratando de marcar con todos estos elementos para con ello. Estas fases, según Chamber y Bax, han sido cuando estamos justamente en un principio de marca de inicio, somos principiantes, luego tenemos una mirada de escepticismo. No lo conozco, no lo quiero utilizar en clase. Lo voy a intentar por primera vez. Bueno, no me resultó tan bien, pero un compañero, colega, me dijo que justamente utilizando esa herramienta le resultó, así que lo voy a tener con otro intento. Luego, los estudiantes no tuvieron una reacción o un resultado muy eficaz y me dio más temor. Y el estudiante, además, para llevarlo a su práctica, también sintió ese temor, pero no lo estamos manejando. Sin embargo, seguimos avanzando porque estamos en la utilización. Estamos tratando de ver de qué manera lo podemos utilizar. Y eso nos lleva a un proceso de estar normalizándolo, de estar integrándolo en el día a día. Y realmente una normalización, una integración, el verlo en el día a día de nuestras actividades, de nuestra enseñanza y de nuestro aprendizaje. Esto ha sido lo que ellos han marcado, pero realmente en un principio lo fueron llamando como etapas y luego escenarios. Durante la presentación vamos a ver por qué esa distinción entre etapas y escenarios. Nos hemos estado enfrentando a nuevas tendencias. Ya no solamente hablamos de herramientas de comunicación o simplemente de búsqueda de información, sino que actualmente ya al hablar de aplicaciones o determinadas herramientas con otros dispositivos móviles especialmente, lo estamos marcando de otra manera, de la utilización en nuestras aulas o fuera del aula o incentivando el aprendizaje autónomo. Sin embargo, la aceptación y el reconocimiento, que es una de las esenciales para la integración, no ha estado por completo. Todavía escuchamos profesores diciendo, no, voy a mandar una tarea a casa, pero tengo que pasarle el Turnitin a juro, porque sé que se están copiando. O justamente tenemos una reacción con el chat GPT. Oye, no puedo mandar una tarea así porque está esta condición de plagio. Sin embargo, dentro de nuestras acciones debería estar el ahondar ese carácter instruccional para una mejor utilización de las herramientas y además de la enseñanza del carácter ético como un valor fundamental de nuestra pedagogía. Entonces, nos encontramos con otros elementos como la tecnología aplicada a la educación, ese gran foco de las herramientas para la formación de nuestros próximos estudiantes y no solamente el logro del C1, y las tecnologías emergentes como la inteligencia artificial, como la realidad virtual, la realidad aumentada, el carácter de metaverso. Pasé por allí unas hojitas donde están al menos 25 o 26 grupos de herramientas que son los que estamos trabajando. Y en unas primeras encuestas, 3, 4 grupos han sido los identificados y no el resto. Realmente entonces, cuando tenemos la aceptación de utilizar nuestros móviles o nuestros computadores, ¿realmente lo utilizamos de manera efectiva? ¿Realmente las herramientas existentes son las que estamos utilizando al máximo o solamente las que nos llevan una marca de comunicación entre nosotros y nada más? Eso también nos lleva a por qué justamente ha sido el chat lo que ha utilizado para la inteligencia artificial de manera abierta, porque la parte comunicativa es lo esencial para nosotros. Esto, por supuesto, el confinamiento ha tenido, y el uso de la tecnología, ventajas y desventajas. Podemos hacer una lista enorme. Interactividad, interacción, feedback, caracterización. Pero ¿qué nos obligó justamente a hacerlo de manera emergente o de emergencia? El confinamiento. El no tener esa posibilidad de salir y acercarnos a nuestros estudiantes, sino buscar una herramienta de acercamiento. Eso también nos llevó a mantenernos en distintos grupos o en específicos grupos. El correo, la videoconferencia, lo que solamente nos llevaba a la comunicación. Pero cuando fue justamente para la creación de otras herramientas o de videos propios o de cápsulas, se nos hizo más difícil. No sabíamos manejar un editor de audio, no sabíamos manejar un editor de texto, o cómo justamente marcar la parte de originalidad en los materiales. Luego nos enfrentamos, vuelta a la presencialidad, y ya muchos de nuestros estudiantes estaban acostumbrados a que la comunicación fuese a distancia. Te tengo al frente, pero te mando un mensaje por el WhatsApp, ¿sí? Ese tipo de situaciones en que nosotros no lo podemos ver como etapas, sino como simplemente escenarios que vamos a tener que enfrentar y ver cómo nos adecuamos a la utilización de herramientas, es lo que justamente estamos viendo. Y por supuesto, con distintos factores. Si la institución tiene o no tiene justamente para marcar esas herramientas, si tenemos temores o expectativas, si tememos al seguimiento y a la medición de lo que estamos haciendo, si realmente hay una integración de los recursos tecnológicos en nuestras aulas y no solamente ver que tengo un micrófono o un data o algo para proyectarlo, sino hasta qué punto puedo utilizar otros recursos allí. La apropiación, realmente me siento capaz con los conocimientos, las habilidades para hacerlo y, por supuesto, la garantía del uso ético e inclusivo de estos materiales. De más está decir que la formación es esencial, tanto para nosotros como docentes, como para la formación de los futuros docentes. Ese elemento de que si la innovación es al día a día a una corriente de extremos kilómetros por hora, nosotros también debemos estar en esa marca, de estar actualizados en el día a día, de no irrumpirnos en mantenernos en una cápsula de solamente manejo este tipo de herramientas. Por supuesto, considerando que nuestra meta para el 2030 es garantizar una educación inclusiva, equitativa, la calidad de promover oportunidades de aprendizaje. Cuando demostramos hay veces una laptop con el sistema Braille en el teclado, muchos dicen, oh, ¿desde cuándo está eso? ¿O desde cuándo estamos marcando eso? O la enseñanza del inglés para personas con necesidades especiales del carácter auditivo o visual. ¿De qué manera? Eso no está en mi malla. Muchas veces ese tipo de elementos está también apegado a la tecnología. ¿Y cuánto estamos nosotros acercados a estas o cercanos a esa tecnología? En el objetivo de la investigación que estamos realizando con el FODEP ha sido evaluar el estado de la normalización del uso de las tecnologías, por supuesto, en la formación inicial del profesorado de inglés en universidades chilenas, particularmente de la región del Maule, pero ¿qué estamos considerando como esencial? Esa aceleración, esa emergencia que fue justamente provocada por el confinamiento, cómo ha sido la reacción con la vuelta a la presencialidad y esa mirada, esas implicancias o esos nuevos desafíos de la inteligencia artificial, pero marcando como meta lo que ha sido el establecimiento de la ODS número 4. Tenemos 3 objetivos específicos, pero ahorita estamos centrados por lo menos en el análisis de la percepción de los docentes y estudiantes. Por supuesto, tenemos también el distinguir el nivel de utilización con estas percepciones y distinguir los factores que actualmente están incidiendo en ese logro de la normalización. Ha sido un estudio con fase cuantitativa y cualitativa, un estudio mixto, con un enfoque transversal, no experimental, de esos niveles de uso y apropiación de recursos tecnológicos en la enseñanza-aprendizaje. Lo hemos realizado con encuestas, con focus group, con esa entrevista grupal semi-estructurada, por supuesto, de los resultados o de los participantes de las encuestas. Han sido de 2 universidades de la región del Maule hasta ahora. Tenemos el análisis de documentos oficiales de tales instituciones y, por supuesto, esta aplicación ha sido voluntaria. Hemos tenido hasta ahora 145 estudiantes, participantes de distintos años, 30 profesores. Hemos tenido la recolección de datos desde el 2021 hasta la actualidad, hasta el momento. Hemos, por supuesto, realizado la descarga de datos, la codificación para la confidencialidad y nos hemos centrado hasta ahora en la información general, competencias, habilidades y experiencias. Allí justamente en las experiencias es cuando nos vamos a ese carácter comparativo inicial en las percepciones. En un primer orden, cuando hablamos de la implementación de estrategias de formación remota que tuvimos del uso de las TIC en el tiempo de confinamiento, hemos observado lo siguiente. No ha sido fácil la adaptación. Por supuesto, tenemos en el caso de la información general cuando observamos que muchos de nuestros estudiantes estaban en zonas rurales o que justamente la institución no estaba en marca de tener los recursos tecnológicos para los mismos docentes que iban a tratar de dar la información a nuestros estudiantes y hacer el seguimiento, la retroalimentación efectiva. Ese carácter cercano no fue posible. Por lo menos un 30% de los alumnos manifiesta que el problema de conexión, de acceso al computador o al laptop, situación económica, o que muchos de los integrantes de la familia estaban en la misma situación escolar o de teletrabajo y tenían solamente un equipo. Esto, por supuesto, afectó a muchos en la permanencia en la universidad. Muchos prefirieron suspender y poder reintegrarse luego. Aunque también hubo una buena actitud del uso de las TICs, han reconocido un bajo nivel de dominio de la mayor parte de los recursos. Cuando estuve rodando la lista de esos 25 grupos, ¿alguien pudo decir, ¿sé manejo los 25 grupos o los 26 grupos? ¿Alguien pudo hacerlo? Justamente ese carácter de no solamente conocerlo, sino de manejarlo y de implementarlo en nuestras aulas, ha sido lo que ha llevado a discusión. Entonces, la educación superior ha tenido o se ha visto en la necesidad de insertar esas competencias tecnológicas a nuestros estudiantes. Muchas universidades ahora están pensando en un rediseño o ya han establecido un rediseño, no solamente por los estándares pedagógicos que ha marcado el ministerio, sino justamente por la situación que fue abordada durante el confinamiento, esa necesidad del manejo o de un dominio general de las tecnologías para que sean integradas. Luego, pensábamos que al volver a la presencialidad ya todo iba a pasar y no íbamos a necesitar estar dependiendo de las tecnologías. Pues no, se hizo justamente una marca de esa necesidad de que sea algo cotidiano, de llevarlo realmente a la normalidad o a la normalización. Entonces, un alto porcentaje de jóvenes se identifican emocionalmente abrumados, de que justamente después del confinamiento se pudieron dar cuenta de que necesitaban ese acercamiento con el profesor, de que realmente la tecnología no estaba sustituyendo el rol profesoral. Y esta situación emocional lo que justamente es guiado a las universidades poner o establecer políticas educativas para esa marca inclusiva de los estudiantes, de proveerles dispositivos o laptops, o justamente que hayan salas especiales en las bibliotecas para que ellos puedan utilizar. Pero no es solamente el dispositivo, no es solamente la herramienta, es el saber usarla, es el poder realmente darle una función educativa. ¿Cuántas veces hemos revisado los placement tests de nuestros estudiantes y justamente la dificultad está reading, writing? Justamente, porque estamos marcando solamente para algunos elementos y no de un carácter transversal y general para el aprendizaje del idioma o para el carácter pedagógico que estamos marcando en la carrera. Esto ha llevado también a una mayor valoración de la retroalimentación cercana presencial y, por supuesto, se mantienen algunas inseguridades y deficiencias en el uso o manejo de las TIC, especialmente porque no es que son marcadas las existentes, sino que cada día conocemos una más. Lucía, ¿quiénes conocen a Lucía acá? Lucía, la aplicación, inteligencia artificial, termina en IA, un chatbox, justamente muy famoso en los estudiantes, porque allá le preguntan exactamente casi todas las tareas, Lucía. Eso, el mantenernos al día de qué está pasando en esta sociedad y de cómo lo vamos a enfrentar en nuestras aulas. Si sabemos que el Consenso de Beijing está desde el 2019 marcando el uso de la inteligencia artificial en nuestras aulas, si justamente estamos marcando de que esta inteligencia artificial está marcado para ser capaces de imitar funcionarios de la inteligencia humana, de que incluye características como percepción, aprendizaje, razonamiento, resolución de problemas, de que está la interacción lingüística, de que está este carácter o esa marca personalizada o caracterizadora como lo hace Elsa Speak, por ejemplo, o como lo hace Write and Improve, muy centrada en el estudiante. ¿Realmente estamos viendo que hay oportunidades? ¿Realmente estamos viendo que nos van a sustituir? ¿O hay algunos retos que justamente tenemos que marcar en nuestra vía académica o nuestra ruta académica para que seamos simplemente acompañantes o un rol integrado? Vemos como oportunidades la innovación educativa constante, ese cambio a diario. Podemos encontrar traducción automática entre idiomas, reconocimiento facial de móviles, el que justamente estemos conversando acerca de la compra de un libro y aparezca en nuestro móvil el libro. Eso es inteligencia artificial. Y lo teníamos hace mucho tiempo a nuestro lado, pero no lo teníamos de un carácter integrado. O solamente ahora, cuando tenemos el chat GPT, es cuando nos damos cuenta de que puede irrumpir en nuestra vida diaria. Pero ahora tenemos que pensar en cómo lo podemos aprovechar y cuál va a ser el carácter ético que vamos a marcar en nuestras aulas para eso. ¿Qué debemos entonces marcar? Planificar las tecnologías dentro de las políticas educativas, velar el por qué las tecnologías nos permiten empoderar a los docentes y no justamente que pensemos que sea un reemplazo, y preparar, por supuesto, a esta próxima generación con valores éticos y competencias de manejo, habilidades. La pregunta, si estamos buscando analizar cuál es nuestro nivel, ¿en dónde estamos? ¿Sentimos temor al decir, no voy a usar ChatGPT porque van a plagiar información? ¿Pensamos que vamos a tener otro intento ya no con Internet o en el 2.0 o el 3.0, sino con inteligencia artificial? ¿Es la primera vez que voy a probar a Lucía? ¿Me siento realmente normalizado con el uso del correo y de Internet? Son escenarios, no son realmente etapas. Nos estamos enfrentando día a día a esa normalización en distintos espacios, momentos en que nosotros estamos o probando por primera vez una herramienta o dándole una mirada de integrarlo en nuestras aulas. ¿Cuál es la intención? Que no nos quedemos en el escepticismo, no nos quedemos con esa mirada de una adopción de principiante donde hay un rechazo. No, eso me está quitando el puesto, o eso me está quitando mi rol docente de acercamiento con mis estudiantes. ¿Qué tenemos que marcar? Realmente una integración. Y allí estamos, viendo distintos escenarios, pero por supuesto, tenemos que tener en cuenta de que nuestro logro debería ser esa educación inclusiva, a través, de manera integrada, de las tecnologías. Factores, muchos de ellos se repiten, siguen estando. ¿Por qué? Porque justamente nos enfrentamos a ellos otra vez en cada escenario. Esto ya lo habíamos visto y creo que ya estaba sobre la hora. Conversemos entonces. Los escucho.
Thank you, Koritza. We have some minutes. If you have questions, is there any question? Yes. Can you help us with the microphone, Freddy?
Hola, hola, ¿qué tal? Que quería hablar un poco sobre cuando decía que el 67% de los estudiantes se sintieron abrumados cuando volvieron a la presencialidad. Y igual querría saber cuáles fueron los estudiantes en sí, porque por ejemplo nosotros somos generación 2020 y empezamos online y luego nunca habíamos estado en la universidad antes de estar online. Pero yo me imagino las personas que estaban en tercero medio cuando empezó la pandemia y después volvieron, tuvieron 2 años, tercero y cuarto en online y después entraron a la universidad presencialmente al tiro. Yo creo que igual marca una diferencia. Las personas que estaban en media no tenían tantos recursos como nosotros que ya empezamos online en la universidad. Entonces yo creo que, por ejemplo, no creo estar tan abrumado no creo que nuestra generación haya estado tan afectada como las generaciones que estaban en media y después llegaron a la universidad.
Mira, agradezco tu pregunta, porque justamente dentro del estudio estuvo desde el 2021 que todavía estábamos en confinamiento y habíamos hecho la especificación con una universidad en particular y no creo que sea tan así de decir esta generación no estuvo abrumada. Recuerda que estuvo ese porcentaje del 30 y el resto no. Pero no tiene que ver con un perfil económico o socioeconómico de si tenían un dispositivo o no. Tenía que ver con esa costumbre de una enseñanza, aprendizaje mucho más directo. Es distinto que estés en sala y estés utilizando recursos tecnológicos, pero me levantas la mano, voy contigo y te explicito justamente lo que tiene que ver con tu duda, a decir que estamos en una sala de videoconferencia y tú levantas la mano, ups, no vi cuando levantaste la mano, o yo estaba tan enganchada en la videoconferencia que no te hice la retroalimentación, o me mandaste una tarea y solamente hice la focalización en el contenido. Justamente por ahí iba eso de sentirse emotivamente afectado, especialmente en lo que tenía que ver con la retroalimentación. Por eso en los resultados está marcado más a esa valorización. No tenía que ver, o sí, por supuesto, está dentro de los factores, la parte socioeconómica o la disponibilidad que tenían de herramientas, pero no era el único factor. Tenía mucho más que ver con esos otros elementos del desarrollo de la clase, del manejo del profesor, pasando 15 minutos tratando de poder subir a la clase, de que todos estuviesen en la clase y después realmente empezar, pasan 30 minutos, se acabaron los 45 minutos, no puedo seguir. Es todo el proceso de ese desarrollo de la clase, de la retroalimentación y de poder hacer el seguimiento, lo que ha afectado realmente a la parte emocional allí. Aquí solamente eché una pincelada de todo lo que hemos recogido en estos 3 años, pero va un poco en esa línea, esa percepción que han tenido tanto estudiantes como profesores a lo que ha alcanzado en distintos niveles todo el proceso de enseñanza-aprendizaje.
Any other question? Yes.
Gracias, Coritza, muy interesante. Más que una pregunta, quisiera hacer un comentario, que en el 2020 me tocó hacer clases en línea, como muchos de los que estamos acá, y yo creo que la parte socioeconómica sí tenía mucho que ver con ese abrumamiento que dices tú, porque si yo estoy en un espacio muy pequeño, donde tengo un hermano que también está en clases y tengo a lo mejor, hay mucho ruido porque a lo mejor estoy en un lugar incómodo, estoy en la cocina, estoy en un comedor pequeño, yo creo que sí afectaba mucho. Y me pongo también en el caso de que haya sido una persona que vivía en una casa grande, con un segundo piso, amplio, cómodo. A lo mejor no voy a estar abrumado porque voy a estar en un espacio de mucha comodidad, donde no estoy escuchando a mis hermanos, a mis papás. Eso, yo siento que el tema socioeconómico aquí sí era bastante determinante.
Sí, yo creo que lo estamos abordando en ese momento, como usted lo plantea, con todos los factores de carácter socioeconómico, del carácter contextual de esa realidad socioeconómica. Pero en aquel caso tenía que ver con que ya tenía el dispositivo o que ya había tenido una experiencia previa. Sin embargo, el carácter de que los demás estuviesen en teletrabajo o que el profesor, aunque fuese soltero y estuviese en su casa encerrado, solo no manejaba el dispositivo o no manejaba las herramientas o los software necesarios y el carácter de estrés muy interno, no por su situación socioeconómica, sino por de dominio de esas herramientas, también era un factor relevante. Sí, yo creo que es justamente el cúmulo de estos factores. Aquí simplemente marcamos 4 grandes, pero podemos ver Sales que dicen que al menos son 7, y así muchos otros autores más cercanos del 2022-2023 han ampliado esa línea de factores. Están un poco más arraigados a lo que tiene que ver con esa adaptación o nuestra percepción realmente de lo útil que tiene que ver, y como tenemos esa reacción automática, sea cual sea nuestro contexto, automáticamente tenemos un afecto emocional allí. Pero sí, tienes razón, es algo que tiene bastante peso, pero dentro de lo que hemos recogido no ha sido el que ha tenido mayor.
Yes. Sí, perfectamente. Y deberíamos volver a lo que es el concepto de integración. Una cosa es que lo tengamos como un carácter del día a día y del uso esencial de la formación docente o de nuestros estudiantes, y otra cosa es una marca de dependencia para hacer absolutamente todo. Y nosotros no debemos ser dependientes de la tecnología, porque le estamos dando nuestro rol a la tecnología. Lo que decía de las políticas, de que justamente tuviese un control de carácter ético y también de lo que es el desempeño del rol docente, ahí está nuestra labor, de que realmente sea lo que vamos a estar utilizando de apoyo para con nuestros estudiantes, para que haya, como dice la misma inteligencia artificial, un carácter multiplicador del conocimiento y no lo único que genera el conocimiento. Entonces ahí es donde está nuestro rol. Si tenemos el uso de ChatGPT y si nos damos cuenta que trabaja justamente con prompts y que nosotros tenemos que tener un carácter instruccional y de contexto para poderlo trabajar, ahí es donde me tengo que enfatizar. Voy a mejorar entonces el discurso instructivo de nuestros estudiantes y la realidad contextual y el conocimiento que pretende multiplicar para que entonces sea realmente no dependencia, sino realmente una herramienta para mejorar el aprendizaje. Y ahí es donde está ese límite, de no quedar solamente para la utilización de esa herramienta, sino para el uso eficaz de la herramienta para mejorar mis conocimientos o ampliar mis conocimientos. ¿Nada? Ajá.
¿Cómo el docente más o menos identifica que el alumno está como desarrollando pensamiento crítico en ese aspecto? Porque ellos están haciendo la cosa preguntándole a ChatGPT, no por su propia mente, sino que buscan y copian y pegan y modifican y la cosa. Entonces ahí no hay pensamiento crítico ahí, sino que la tecnología está haciendo la tarea en general por el estudiante.
Espléndida pregunta. Si aquí nos fuimos al concepto de integración, acá nos vamos realmente a lo que sería el concepto o la utilización real de la inteligencia artificial, multiplicador de conocimiento. Si el mismo profesor lo que está a la mira de ver que no haya existido plagio, de que no haya sido elaborado por otra herramienta y no por el mismo estudiante, ese carácter reflexivo o instruccional o todos los otros elementos que no van a ser simplemente con un concepto o con una base informativa en el producto final, eso debería ser marcado por el profesor. No justamente marcar, oye, ¿existe algún detector de plagio para el ChatGPT? No. El profesor tiene que tener justamente en ese proceso de adaptación y de reconocimiento de la herramienta, hasta qué punto yo puedo utilizarla para multiplicar ese espacio reflexivo de mis estudiantes. Sí, puedes buscar en el ChatGPT la información general, así como mismo lo puedes buscar en Internet, pero yo quiero justamente que des una mirada reflexiva al tema. Eso no lo puede tener. Esa parte emotiva todavía el ChatGPT no la tiene. Esa parte reflexiva todavía el ChatGPT no la tiene. Necesitas tener esa asociación de información y poder multiplicar el conocimiento que tienes acá para poderlo sobrellevar y plantear en esos ejercicios. Si nosotros a nuestros estudiantes solamente le pedimos, conceptualiza el término tal, eso lo puede buscar en internet, en el ChatGPT, en cualquier otro elemento, copiado y pegado. Pero si nosotros nos vamos con una mirada más a esos espacios metacognitivos o reflexivos de nuestra cátedra, eso no lo va a poder lograr todavía con un Lucía o con un ChatGPT. Ahí es donde está nuestro rol y establecer esas políticas.
Thank you. The last question, Professor Arencibia.
Thank you very much, but it's in Spanish. Un comentario realmente interesante, cómo la pandemia fue un hito para la introducción de tecnologías. Por ejemplo, en el caso nuestro, sirvió para la introducción de una tecnología que es la tecnología del mRNA para una vacuna, que fue la Pfizer, y fue muy cuestionada. Claro. Pero al final hubo una aceptación, hay una aceptación. Y la aceptación está justamente por el número de la muestra, y esto ya forma parte de lo que sería el diseño experimental. Y ahí va la pregunta, ¿cuál sería el número de muestra óptimo y la representatividad de esa muestra en su proyecto? Porque hablaban de 145 encuestas, 30 profesores. Limitada. Si hacemos la extrapolación a las millones de personas que aceptaron la tecnología de la nueva vacuna, que era algo que estaba... Entonces, en su proyecto, ¿cuál sería el número de muestras mínimo que ustedes esperan para llegar a una conclusión o a un grupo de conclusiones aceptadas?
Sí, bueno, ya aquí nos vamos un poco más a la parte de metodología y limitante del alcance en la región del Maule y que tenemos 3 universidades donde justamente se implementa esta carrera. También el alcance que podemos marcar al desempeñarnos con determinadas funciones en algunas de estas universidades. Por supuesto que nos encantaría que fuese a nivel mundial, a nivel nacional y que tuviésemos millones, así como justamente el Círculo lo hizo a nivel latinoamericano. Nosotros estuvimos revisando toda esa bibliografía y a nivel de aceptación podríamos marcar que en distintos puntos de esas redes fueron marcados en distintos países. Y al nivel de contrastar los resultados de estas investigaciones podemos decir que sí, que hay un nivel de aceptación. Nosotros no lo podemos marcar por esa vía completamente. Tenemos que darle ese peso, por un lado, a la mirada cualitativa de esta investigación y un poco más reflexiva realmente qué estamos haciendo y cómo lo vamos a abordar. Porque aunque estamos hablando de normalización desde VAX en el 2000, 2003, nuestras universidades en Chile apenas lo pudieron marcar con el COVID, 2019 o 2020. Entonces tenemos una mirada de todos esos años, de la mirada de normalización en el mundo, desde el 2003, a la situación de Chile. A nivel de esa validación cuantitativa, estamos muy atrás de poder lograrla todavía. Por supuesto, lo que le decía a nuestra compañera de formación general al principio, la intención es buscar otras vías de que entre las universidades de la región del Maule o del país, como lo está haciendo Malva Barahona en sus investigaciones, lo podamos marcar y tener mayor validez o la validación de nuestros resultados. Pero por ahora estamos haciendo simplemente ese esfuerzo.
Porque la muestra es profesores de inglés y estudiantes de inglés.
Exactamente.
Ah, pero hay una limitante ahí, porque estamos hablando de tecnología en general, debería haber un mayor...
No, es solamente de profesores de inglés,
de la muestra.
De inglés y de estudiantes. No, sin embargo, hay mucho más que 30 profesores de inglés.
O por lo
en
menos mayor
universidades.
representatividad en localidades, digamos.
Claro, no, pero esta mirada en ese aspecto, en la parte de percepciones, justamente podríamos mirarlo más a lo cualitativo y a lo reflexivo de qué es lo que estamos haciendo y cómo nos estamos enfrentando a los nuevos desafíos.
Okay, thank you very much for your questions. Thanks, Koritza, for such an interesting topic.
Okay. I have been asked to introduce Mr. Claudio Jaramillo, and he will be joining us from Canada. So thank goodness for technology. Mr. Jaramillo holds a master's degree in TEFL and is currently a PhD candidate in the Curriculum, Teaching, and Pedagogy Department at the Ontario Institute for Studies in Education at the University of Toronto, Canada. With 18 years of experience as a teacher-educator at university level, he has also served as a member of the Curriculum and Assessment Unit of the Ministry of Education here in Chile, where he designed the English language curriculum for 3rd and 4th year of high school. His research interests revolve around high school socio-political cultures and how neoliberal inequity in education affects students' learning experiences, and as well as teachers' teaching experiences. He focuses on how English language education reproduces and expands neoliberalism-driven narratives and discourses that make inequity invisible within both the curriculum and the school cultures. Additionally, his research examines how school members negotiate, rationalize, and resist those concealed narratives, as well as their impact on their school cultures. He draws on various educational frameworks, such as pedagogies of solidarity with anti-colonial praxis orientations, critical applied linguistics, Freudian approaches to collaborative language education, critical action research, and narrative inquiry in school settings. Let's welcome Mr. Jaramillo, please.
Hello, you can hear me? Are we okay with the audio? So I don't receive any feedback on
Claudio, yes.
on mine. We're okay. Okay,
Yeah,
good. So
it's okay.
So let me share my my PowerPoint. So can you see everything there? Is it good for you? Okay, I see thumbs up on the public there.
Yes, it's okay. Thank you.
Great, amazing. So, okay, well, thank you so much for the introduction. It's wonderful to have the opportunity to be here, at least remotely, with you folks. Thanks for the space, and especially for the organizers of this symposium. So my presentation is called Unpacking the Hidden Curriculum of English Language Education in an Urban State Subsidized High School during the COVID-19 pandemic confinement. So if you're in Canada, you most likely will be residing on the ancestral territory of an indigenous nation. And so a land acknowledgement needs to be invoked. So I wish to acknowledge this land on which the University of Toronto operates, because for thousands of years has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. And today, this meeting place is still the home to many indigenous people from across Turtle Island, North America in colonial terms. And I am grateful to have the opportunity to share this work with you from this land, and also to commit to solidarity with indigenous peoples and their languages in Canada and in Chile as well. So my presentation, my outline, goes from showing my rationale, my research procedures, my findings, and my reflections and insights that I wish to, expand in a conversation. So let's get started with my topic. So I'd like to begin with this quote for you to get a sense of what I'm going to talk about today. So it says, there's something rather bizarre in the belief that if everyone learned English, everyone would be better off. Better off means to be in really good conditions, in economic, better positions, and so on. So my study as such is framed under critical pedagogy with a focus on the political implications of English language education in high schools. At the same time, I purposefully step out from the traditional linguistic orientation in ICETLT, since I am very much captivated by the politics of English language education in school settings as a more interesting dimension of English language education. So, and certainly it's one that reveals a fascinating dimension that oftentimes obscure students' actual learning experiences. So this presentation is about those other learning experiences.
Claudio, sorry, we are still watching the first slide.
The first slide?
Yes.
Can you see now
the presentation?
Can you see the
because we are watching the slides on the left side and on the first one.
The first one, let me check. I'll stop sharing and I'll reshare again.
No, it's the same.
The same?
Mm-hmm.
So stop sharing. Let me try again. Can you see it now?
Yeah.
So I think I went to...
Yeah, now it's correct. Okay.
Now it's correct?
Thank
Okay,
you.
perfect, amazing. So that was the quote I was referring to. And so here we go. So I was mentioning that my research is basically centered at the intersection of neoliberalism and education. And obviously I examined this intersection from the perspective of the English language curriculum and its pedagogy. So my focus in this presentation is on the narratives we tell each other about what it means to learn English at school, and at the same time centering students as oftentimes overlooked members in the educational continuum that mostly looks at teachers and teaching rather than, the whole body of school. So my problematics explore or has to do with those aspects of English language learning that are not evident and that are yet extremely influential in shaping the cultural perspectives of students, individually as well as collectively. So these are guiding questions for you to understand more or less the problem. These are not my actual research questions, but just like for the purposes of the presentation. So basically, what I'm asking here is that in 12 years or whatever number of years of English at school, what else are students learning in the English class? So an important challenge here then consists of understanding what these non-linguistic learning experiences are all about and how and where they happen. And as I told you, that there's an explicit dimension of the curriculum, which we teach, but at the same time, there's an unnoticed ongoing process that evolves along with our teaching. So that's why I'm bringing up the concept of hidden curriculum. Broadly speaking, the hidden curriculum is a series of unintended lessons that are passed on through the process of schooling. Some authors, these are learning experiences which we reproduce culture. For other authors, it has to do with the ideological meanings that are transmitted while we are being educated at school. So these are lessons learned silently in classrooms throughout time, through specific dynamics, so the repetition and the constant, recursivity of schooling culture that actually ultimately shape culturally those subjects at school, students, teachers, and everyone. And so the construct of hidden curriculum has been a very useful framework since the 60s to identify all those non-official learning experiences. And then it's important to emphasize one central premise. Classrooms and schools and teaching are never neutral and are never objective, okay? So therefore, schools and education are under an axiomatic premise of cultural politics. So the conceptual breakdown of the notion of hidden curriculum indicates the areas of attention required in the process of examining the process of schooling. So these questions more or less reflect each of the framework components. The one I want to highlight is the one at the center in agency. So big question in a hidden curriculum is, or in the case of the English language curriculum, is who is the English user or learner we aim to educate? Because this is a political question, okay? So it requires to understand what does these students need to know? What are they supposed to believe about English, for example? What kind of relations they build and under what terms? So my methodological design, it's framed in a qualitative dimension anchored in a critical paradigm. So I implemented a hybrid method, integrated a 3-layer process, including critical ethnography, which is ethnographic work conducted in online settings. Remember that, or for you to have in mind, this research happened during the COVID pandemic, so it was everything online. Then I embedded a case study, and then I embedded, an inner layer of critical collaborative inquiry, which corresponds to the teaching component. I was collaborating with teachers. So my participants are 80, or this, what I'm presenting today is 81 students who I engaged with for 1 semester during the pre-vaccination stages of the pandemic. So we were still, struggling with the idea of thinking if we were gonna, come back to normal times. My strategies were mostly based on conversational approaches. So to get to know in more depth the students' perceptions and understandings. My focus is mostly on students. That was like my intention. Although I talk to teachers and I engage with teachers, what I'm reporting today is a portion of students. And so I analyze these materials using 3 techniques with a reflective thematic analysis as an umbrella strategy, including critical discourse and social semiotic analysis of those narratives. So my findings are organized in 3 clusters that I name hidden lessons that we learn during our trajectories at school learning English. These experiences were not about actually, as I said, learning or about language acquisition per se, but those lessons related to the process of learning English. So these interconnected clusters exist within a very complex matrix of sociocultural learning experiential narratives. This is something that I want to highlight, actually. So they represent a broad synthesis of their English classes takeaways, so the life lessons that they took from after learning English, because these are grade 12 students, which included mostly symbols, understandings, perceptions that shaped their dispositions and attitudes in very particular modes. So the first hidden lesson has to do with how students learn to envision themselves as potential English speakers. This is like one central and like an upper layer. The second hidden lesson has to do with the sociocultural values that tension the process of becoming an English speaker. So there are social and cultural elements that the students struggle with that are dissonant with the school or with the narrative within the school. And the third lesson has to do with the ideological discourses that articulate the whole narrative. So these are fragments that I will share with you from the interviews mostly. So the findings in this first lesson are very dark somehow, because it shows how their learning process, first of all, is ultimately instrumental. That is to say, with a very fixed goal. But at the same time, they encounter important obstacles in their classes, and so this is what I was saying, that it's a layer that is closer to pedagogy. We will go actually going deeper and deeper on these experiences. So in these quotes, the students were expressing specific points. The first one to your left is that at the end of the process of learning English in cuarto medio, there is this sentiment of failing and getting lost, and especially in those students who did not learn English, and who are usually a large majority, unfortunately. So when I talk to them, and I explored the reasons why they think this way, they pointed out very consistently and very homogeneously that there are two obstacles. The idea that they need to achieve native-like pronunciation was one, and their assumptions, and this is interesting, about an existing cultural referent, which they represented as los gringos, meaning the white subject. So this, I'm going to return to this point. And the resolution after these obstacles, after this sensation of failure, is that they create a deferral narrative, as a future tense narrative, saying, one day I will learn, as a sort of excuse of this process of failing. So they articulate this notion from not being able to reach this standard, and thus defer their attempts and intentions to the future. And so as I was unpacking all these symbols and narrative and explanations which conform to this hidden curriculum, I noticed that this is a process that is also invisible to teachers, because the students' concern to become an English speaker was placed particularly on pronunciation. So becoming a native speaker, sounding like a gringo, and approaching this idea of the white person. Whereas teachers were mostly concerned about grammar. So we were having two simultaneous conversations that were not, directed at the very same goal. So what is most interesting is that the future tense moral commitment they develop behind those experiences is not that they want to stop being invested in learning English, and on the contrary, their intention remains very much alive despite failing in the English class. So this becomes a life learning goal for them. And this does not happen, for example, with mathematics. They fail mathematics, they finish mathematics, and goodbye, I'm never coming back. But English remains in the future plans. So such process of self-envisioning as an English speaker has a critical hidden factor around the notion of whiteness, that needs further unpacking. And when I say whiteness, we need to understand that this is a social construct. This is not about white people. It's a social idea that attributes privileges, advantages, and power to individuals who are perceived as white. So it perpetuates systemic racism by centering and valuing white experiences, norms, and perspectives while marginalizing and oppressing people of color. So English language curriculum needs examining on these issues because it's a very strong hidden referent. The second lesson intersects identity construction from a socioeconomic status perspective. So this is regularly the most critical point you might hear about learning English that has to do with, socioeconomic status, but it's a bit deeper than that. These factors, however, reside outside the school to a greater extent. They exist within the school as well. But this outside power has a very important impact in shaping how students approach the English class. So the external culture, for instance, mostly from parents, and this is very interesting, and from media, tensions the English classroom understandings in silent ways. So the narratives encompass the self-perception of individuals as members of a sociocultural nation state. That is to say, me Chilean learning English, like in very concrete terms. And these expose sociocultural judgment, stereotypes, and social imaginaries that differentiate between cultures, leading to notions of superiority and inferiority. So if you look at the first excerpt, look at the language in red. Un estatus más alto, nosotros somos retrasados y ellos son evolucionados. That's a very strong language. And it's interestingly very homogeneous as well. So based on this socioeconomic instrumental process, in turn, it commodifies and transforms English into social currency. English for opportunities, English for mobility, English for, prosperity. So this means those who know English are better people, will earn more, and will be more successful. And all these ideas necessarily conform to a neoliberal society. So it's very consistent with what's going on. And so entering now to the core of the hidden curriculum, we need to bring into light the idea of integrativeness, which is a concept that helps unpacking a series of dispositions that the students reveal. For example, Eurocentric approaches to understanding languages. For example, indigenous languages are not worth it. European languages are, So there's this, immediate division in terms of, hierarchization of languages. So the overall narrative generated in this lesson has to do with a social identification as a foreigner. In the end, this is how it clusters. So foreignness is a narrative related to periphery, and this is funny, because it rests on a sense of xenocentrism, which means the despise of our own culture. We hate our own culture because their culture is better. So the students were constantly saying that they want to escape Chile because we are underdeveloped, we are a third world country. They have all these, ideas about we being less and they being more. So what matters here is how they justify such interests. And teachers here have an important impact on how this narrative is configured. So the last lesson is basically the glue that binds the other two lessons. And it corresponds to the sociocultural discourses and symbols that articulate and give sense somehow to the English language narrative as we understand it in Chile. This discourse shows that people, the notion of person, is removed from the communicative role of language, leaving only the structure, only a skeleton. So that's why the student at the beginning says, what else is language? It's just language. So it's devoided of all its value or of its human component. And then when it's taken to the classroom, look at what the student says, is that they teach me the basics, meaning grammar, but they don't teach me how to develop as a person who speaks English. And I think this is a key problem in the curriculum. So our main concept here that we need to isolate, it's the notion of verbocentrism. And verbocentrism means that language is detached from its speakers. Language becomes a simple abstract entity that makes no sense, it's functional. When we say, for example, English as a tool, that's a manifestation of verbocentrism. So here, symbols, metaphors, and a very specific language plays a significant role in how students name this experience that they go through school. So this language, interestingly, is taken for granted. It's unquestionable, and its core is commonsensical. And common sense in ideological theories is the door to a social structure need. So all these implicit rules we have in society, for instance, to have a better job, you need English. That's a structure need. It's not real, it's invented. Someone decided that. So thus, the ideological character of the narrative. So to conclude, the hidden curriculum of English learning shapes students' aspirations, influences their cultural identities, and reinforces white ethnocentric norms, which impact their attitudes and dispositions and motivations to the language and to their envisioned selves as people who are learning. So this narrative reflects rigid ideologies and rigid imaginaries and imagined interlocutors, posing a very complex challenge for teachers who usually lack the necessary skills to address this effectively. This is very difficult to face. So the clash between, for example, students' aspirations as language users and teachers' perceptions of them as language learners creates important contradictions in how expectations are framed, how motivations unfold, leading students to rely mostly on market-oriented discourses that come from the external environment outside the school. So this discourse and sociocultural repertoires shape their experiential narratives about what it means to learn English. So to conclude, and some reflections, I believe that the English curriculum, and therefore probably the pedagogy, should prioritize the self in an ethical, communicative interaction. Ethics is very important as an element of pedagogy, and moving away from the homogenizing and erasing ideologies that we usually exacerbate in English language pedagogies. And so actively integrating students' opinions and perspectives is crucial for reorienting teaching and practices and even research, because we research teachers. We experiment with students. We have different treatment with students. We don't legitimize students' voice regularly. We say we do, but that does not necessarily translate in actual praxis. So I believe that learning English should be redefined as an opportunity to encounter and learn from cultural differences, emphasizing the importance of listening and positioning difference at the forefront of the English curriculum. And these are some of my references, and that's the presentation. Okay. Did I stop sharing?
Thank you very much, Claudio. Are there any questions? Are there any questions?
I would like to mention and comment a part that says in the presentation that a student told that the teachers teach like grammar and vocabulary, but not in a way that the students can learn how to act as an English speaker. Like they don't teach you the reality of the English. But my question is, no, I don't know if a question or a comment, but transform the curriculum to teach how the reality of an English environment is, for me, in my opinion, would be so difficult or too difficult, because how you can do that if they don't understand the vocabulary or the grammar? Because I think to teach that aspect, the reality, you need to know the vocabulary and the grammar before. And so what you can do to teach in a real environment without teaching grammar and vocabulary first?
Sorry, what's your name?
My name is Bastian.
Bastian, thank you. Thank you for your question. That's very interesting. You need to differentiate several things here. We need to differentiate what is the dimension of curriculum and the dimension of pedagogy. Those are two different conversations. And those different conversations, although they're related, they have a very different nature and a very different objective. So I'm not saying that we should stop teaching grammar or pronunciation or vocabulary. That's obviously part of the language. What I'm saying is like how people frame that language teaching, for example. Under what excuses are we teaching grammar? Because if you, or I will put it from the point or the perspective of my data. So the students were for example, showing that the fact of learning grammar is a very recursive process. And it means that it's repeated each year. And they were telling me that each year they were learning literally the very same content, the very same grammar. And that's because like who are we teaching for? Are we teaching for the students, or are we teaching for ourselves to show that we know something? So there's a tension there in teaching that has to do with the focus of our teaching. And that's why it's important as well to bring into a conversation every now and then with the students what's going on and how they are understanding what we are doing. It's not about, removing grammar, removing pronunciation. It's just like to match our conversations. That's a basic, pedagogical process and strategy that we should do every now and then. But then at the level of curriculum, as you're mentioning, well, the curriculum has to do with politics. Curriculum is pure politics. And sometimes, and in order to discuss this politics, we need to be really informed about what it means to learn English. Because like English is shown or is taught in Chile as a very neutral activity. But we need to understand what's the story of English as well. And we need to bring memory global memory here. English is an imperial language, and thousands of people have died because of the imposition of English in the world. We need to be aware of that. It's not an innocent, action that just happened to be. So that's a very long-term historical struggle that we need to, define, and that has to do with the politics of, linguistics. But when it comes to the classroom, you need to be aware of where you're standing. And where you're standing means knowing who your students are, what their socioeconomical background is, what are their purposes, what are their understandings, and what are their intentions as well. Students are very invested and interested in learning English. I mean, this is not an issue about motivation. They are genuinely interested in learning English, but something happens on the way that this passion somehow dies. And that's why the students were all the time manifesting in my interviews that, teacher, we didn't learn anything. So I will leave this for the future, like I will pay an institute, I will do something in the future. So there's a disconnection that is pedagogical, and it has a lot to do in how we enforce grammar as the only thing to be done in an English class. So this is like something important that is not only about grammar. There are way more things that you can use and vocabulary that you can teach. But that language choice, that grammar choice is also ideological from the perspective of teaching. So we need to deal with lots of contradictions, lots of obstacles. But my takeaway from even my own experience is that talk to students and negotiate with students things. Obviously, there are things you cannot negotiate with them, like probably assessment, because you will be forced to get a number of marks and so on, or comply with specific requirements. But pedagogy, ultimately, it's about relationality. It's how you acknowledge the other as a person who will learn. That's basically my answer. I don't know if I'm answering your question.
Yeah. Yeah. Are you able to listen to me? Yeah.
Yes, I am.
Yeah. My name is Ranjiva, and I'm a faculty member here at the Faculty of Educational Sciences in the Department of Educational Foundation. Very well. First of all, congratulations for your wonderful presentation. I personally, I feel I really liked it, the data, the way you have dealt with it, because somehow I also connect with what you presented. And the last comment which you made also, the historical trajectory of this imposition of English worldwide, I totally agree with that comment also. It happens. I'm from India. I know we were British. You know the history, how it has happened. Now, the comment I would like to make is in the Chilean context, that still for the last 3 years, 3-4 years I have been here, and when I came here, first the impression which I had that there is no policy as such, the linguistic policy you may call it. And for example, someone asked me, okay, what is the official language in Chile? I mean, I said Spanish, they all speak. Okay, so official language, when we say, it has to be as per the constitution, and the constitution should say that this is the official language and these are other recognized languages. That doesn't exist in Chile. That is, first choke you can say, I can say, because in India we have 22 official languages. In every region you say you have one, and that is as per the constitution. And the second thing I want to refer to your this presentation, and two things, two theoretical concepts which I would like, I would like your opinion about how about the theory of acculturation. Would it be, because this differences somewhere now, superiority, inferiority and all, this can somehow can be dealt with the theory of acculturation. If what do you is your opinion first, and second thing, this appreciation of differences and similarities in culture can also be looked into from the theoretical perspective of intercultural communicative competence. Now, intercultural education, which is here in Chile, I have seen, what I have observed. So what is your opinion on these two theoretical perspectives, one? And there was one that I missed, is there was one more observation on, I missed that one. But anyway, so these are the two perspectives of acculturation and intercultural communicative competence, or intercultural communication, you may say. Do you think somewhere can fit into this overall imagination of English? The observation which I forgot is this: since very beginning, because this is English is globally how it has been marketed, in the market, how, and your approach to it through neoliberal perspective, I really appreciate that, because that is everywhere. Somewhere Chilean policy, for example, English abre puerta. Now, the moment one hears that it opens door, means it is somewhere, it has this beneficiary in 2004. So these kind of connotation which have been propagated somewhere also gives rise to this kind of the mindset which, in this case, the students, the population, they have that if I learn English, there will be a gate open for me to see the world. So what do you think about these comments or perspective? Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much. I will try to keep up the track with your questions, but yes, totally. Regarding your first point about policy, well, in Chile, we don't have language policy. We have an educational curriculum, which is understood somehow as the policy. And this is sad to say, because with the rejection of the proposal of constitution, we were about to have a language policy. Chile is a plurilingual country. We like it or not. So this is something that we need to bear in mind in Chile. And that has to do with how certain, sectors of the politics is gatekeeping, a very conservative agenda when it comes to, languages, because you need to basically erase certain identities that are problematic for the economy. So what brings money? English. So here we go. So plurilingualism is something that happens, and it's linguistic diversity that we need to, acknowledge, because it exists. And because we don't have a policy, we cannot be accountable for those differences or for those, languages in a more robust terms. So we need a lot to learn, for example, from India, from Sri Lanka. Those are countries who have evolved and develop notions of language that are respectful of their own diversity. In that sense, like we are going back to, or jumping to your third point, we are consumed by this idea of globalization and neoliberalism. And don't get me wrong in this point, because in Chile we have this idea of the global agenda that it's like a very poorly informed understanding of globalization. But if you look at the serious definitions of globalization. Globalization is technically, it's a form of neocolonialization in which we individuals are in charge of our own, we need to carry the burden of something that's going on behalf of, this diversity, so-called diversity. But what happens is that globalization tends to erase identities. It's a concept that actually agglutinates differences into one single body. It's homogenizing concept. So yes, there's one component of globalization that can be positive and beneficial in terms of the cultural exchanges that we can generate. But we need to understand what are the ultimate purposes of globalization. And that necessarily needs to be understood through capitalism. In the world as a capital, as the main politics of global organization requires mobility, requires, labor. And globalization actually opens the doors to move labor around the globe. So we need people to do stuff. So this is like one of the functions of globalization. And in that process, when it comes to the classrooms, to specific, language classrooms, we start talking about acculturation. And acculturation can be understood in many ways. I look at it with a pinch of salt, because acculturation as well means to assimilate. And that means, I'm not comfortable with your difference, so you need to look like us. This is pretty much like the sociological process that happens behind acculturation. And many authors, and this is, to me, is like quite troublesome, that they posit this idea as a positive thing to happen in how you adapt and adjust to the culture. But like in the case of second language societies, like making this, hierarchical division as well, like second language society, foreign language society like us, second language societies like this one behind me is one that assimilates people with lots of slogans about diversity, about, difference, but in the end, what rules here is a normative white framework of society in which you will be always racialized, you will be always, not fully understood as a full human because you lack whiteness. And this is the danger of, in racism. And that is like a silent thing that moves really slowly in very, what's the word? In benign concepts that are not benign at all. So that's why, like, for me, when it comes to talk about curriculum, the notion of difference as an ethical project needs to be at the center. I acknowledge your language, I acknowledge your cultural background, and we're gonna build on that difference, not on your assimilation or you becoming what I am. This is, for me, a fundamental problem. I don't know if I'm asking answering your question, sorry.
Okay, thank you very much. We have no more time for questions, sorry, right? Because remember that we have a schedule. Well, you're invited now to have a coffee, delicious coffee here outside. In 25 more minutes, we're going to start again. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
There you are. There.
O sea, la que viene ahora. Entonces ahora después viene una persona,
Sí,
para dejarlo listo, ¿puede ser? Ya, porque si se pone... Voy a tener... ¿Sí? Sí. Y todo lo que voy a estar compartiendo ya... ¿Aquí? Ya. Claro. Porque ahí... Sí. Sí. Ya ven. We're good. I almost forgot about my students that had to take a test. I was like, wait, sorry. And I'm gonna do it from here. Exactly. So we're gonna do a Teams call, and then it's con los invitados. Sí. estoy conectada y no está proyectando. Ah, ya. Sacar el banano, por favor. No sé, pero ¿qué hago? Porque estoy mirando para allá. Ay, no sé. No. Ahora sí. Ya. Vamos a la ¿Cómo? No, sí sé. No, estamos ordenando el tema del computador. Es que como yo tengo varios links y esas cosas. Hace tiempo y es screen. Pantalla.
Mejor el escritorio completo porque cuando uno manipula el link y eso, nos aseguramos que aparezca todo su escritorio.
Claro, entonces ahí sería el screen, ¿cierto?
Claro,
Sí, exacto. Sí, y ahí estaría. Ya, entonces lo puedo como cerrar. Sí, ah, ya, ya, sí, súper, ya, para asegurar que...
Hello, can you hear me? Yes. Okay, well, first, I'm so sorry for the delay. Yeah, now we are going to continue. We have to continue with the following presentations. Yeah, so now I'm going to introduce two professors. They are going to show us their presentation. The first one is Sebastián Mercado. He's an English language teacher, lecturer, and holds a master's degree in TEFL from UNCE. He's a lecturer at Practicum and Practicum supervisor at Universidad Católica Silva Enríquez and Universidad Bernardo Higgins from Santiago. In fact, they traveled today, right, from Santiago, the capital. And Victor Birkner, he's a teacher of English and an educational researcher. He holds a master's degree in applied linguistics from the University of Sheffield and his PhD in education from the University of Exeter. His research interests include language teaching identity, critical literacy, and English language teaching materials. So please receive them with a warm applause, please. Oh, welcome.
Hello. Hey, can you hear me? Yes, you can. Well, first of all, thank you very much for having us. This is a very important moment for us and for our investigation. As you heard, my name is Sebastián Mercado. My colleague is Victor Birkner. And together we're working on this research about gamification and its use on academic writing. We have used it on different subjects, but particularly for this presentation, we're going to cover a writing course that I gave last year. All right? So that's about it. Can we? Who I told? Sorry. What's oh, this one. Thank you very much. There we go. So this is what, in broad terms, what we're going to cover, all right? I'm going to give you some context, going to tell you about the cases. And my colleague is going to tell you about the research question and sort of the methodology and the literature we have been using, all right? So first, there you go. First, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the context of the research, okay? This research starts back in 2018, 2019, when I discovered what modern board games were, okay? I've always been a gamer. I love video games as Pokemon, I love Final Fantasy, and many different modern video games that are very popular today. But my interest in applying games to education started when I discovered board games, more specifically Catan. Have you heard of it? Yes, okay, that's very good. All right. So when I started looking into these games, I discovered the potential that they could have for my job, which is teaching English. At that time, I was teaching at schools, so my interest was to teach my young students with games, through games, okay? However, this sort of changed and evolved when I started working at university. I finished my MA, and I started thinking in a more critical way about it, okay? And for that, I started thinking, I started a research, basically, and I looked into what has been done so far. And I discovered that gamification is a field of study that has been broadly covered by many different authors, okay? Many different researchers and lecturers around the world are applying gamification to their lessons and studying it as a tool for learning. So what is gamification? In general terms, according to Sebastian Deterding, which is the father of gamification, we have the gamification is the use of game elements in non-gaming context, okay? Non-gaming context could be anything, really, okay? Meaning a class, health situations, anything that you can think of that is not a game, okay? So that is gamification, using game-like elements into a non-game context. Now, what is a game element, right? We have the concept of a game mechanic, and game mechanics are explicit set of rules. Basically, we have rules that make games, any type of situation that is related to a game in a way. You can have many different types of mechanics. In simple ways, such as, for example, throwing a die, that is a game mechanic, okay? Because you have chance, right? It's a random number that's gonna come up, and that is a game mechanic. You can have many examples. I'm pretty sure that you've heard of Kahoot, right? However, our research focuses on something beyond the use of only technology. It could be used, definitely, and it's a very helpful tool. But game mechanics can be anything, and it's not necessary that you have internet access or a computer with you in order to do it, okay? So for having that in mind, we have to think about this. What is gamification and what is a game mechanic? Because those are the ones that we're gonna use. Are we good so far? Yeah, okay, thank you. There we go. In order to understand this, we need to think about motivation. Gamification focuses mainly on on thinking about what type of motivation do players have, okay? And according to Marchevsky, we have 6 different types of motivation. You can see them there, and if you Google gamification, you're gonna find this very easily, all right? So I'm not gonna go in deep into this, but I'm gonna focus on 3. Okay? If you take a look at the free spirit, the achiever, and the player categories, we're going to see that we have 3 different types of motivation that I found that my students had a tendency to them, okay? In the first place, we have the free spirit. Free spirit, as it says, it's driven by autonomy, by curiosity, okay? It's the type of user or the type of player or the type of person that looks for new things, that likes to discover different elements, that like to explore a new environment, okay? So every one of you that likes to travel somewhere new and know a new place, you're probably a free spirit, okay? Also, we have the achiever. Achievers are driven by mastery, okay? They want to achieve goals, they want to hit milestones, and they want to complete tasks, which is a key term for our research. And finally, we have the player. Most of us are players as well, because players are focused on rewards, okay? They want to get the reward, they want to get the point, they want to get the badge, all right? So if you want that, you're most likely a player type, or you are motivated by that, okay? Now, this doesn't mean that you're only, or that you belong to only one category. That's nonsense, okay? Most likely you're gonna have like 2, 3, maybe 4, maybe the 6 of them, okay? It depends on the mood of your day, it depends on your personal characteristics, okay? So it's a mixture of things. And now, we're moving to the cases, to the research that we have been carrying out. For that, I'm gonna show you 2 cases. The first case is related to the most common type of mechanic that you're going to find in video games and some board games. Missions. Most video games, Candy Crush, Fortnite, basically anything, they have missions. The idea of a mission is that you have a specific task that you have to complete in order to know or to learn how to play the game, okay? So I thought about this and I said, okay, I want my students to have missions, and we'll see if I propose them as missions, how is this gonna work, okay? Now, the mission alone is not gonna work, because what's the point on doing something if I don't get something back, right? So I came up with the idea with random rewards, okay? And you're gonna see some examples later. Basically, we have this. You're gonna see some examples of missions of this type. There are 2 more. There you go. These are examples of the missions that were proposed to my students in their lessons, okay? They aim to specific tasks that I wanted them to do and to carry out, okay? You can see some examples. Speak only English during the lesson, write at least 3 sentences in your notebook. These are very simple, right? But they are, the idea of them is that they motivate students to achieve these tasks, okay? And to teach them how to cover the lesson, all right? Because if I am speaking all the time about the context and the paragraph and the types of sentences and complex, simple, and compound, my students are gonna get bored, right? So I needed them to complete specific things at specific moments. And you can see some examples there. Complete 3 tasks, look for new vocabulary, name 3 characteristics of modal verbs, and blah, 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 blah. We have many, and I have, trust me, I have many of these examples in my presentations in my computer. But, as I told you, the mission is not only, it's not worth it by itself, right? We need something else. And here is when we have rewards. Rewards can be anything that is related to the lesson and that can have a sort of meaningful meaning for my students. For example, we have this badge, a very simple concept, a badge. Every time they completed a unit, they get something like this, a badge, okay? So see, you take this as proof of your accomplishment. And my students were very happy, okay? It could be also things like a free hug. Who doesn't like a free hug, right? And you give them this type of rewards. Every time you finish the lesson, at the wrap-up of your lesson, you provide this reward. Once you say, okay, did you complete all your missions? And you ask some key questions. In a scale from 1 to 10, how difficult was this content? Did you write 3 sentences? Did you speak English all the time in the lesson? If they did that, probably most of them, or some of them, are not gonna do it, but the ones who did are gonna receive this, okay? Another example, this is an example from a practicum course that I gave also. And this was awarded right after the first lesson. So if they completed all the missions in the first lesson, they get this little marker. And they say, okay, this is going to be very helpful for you. I didn't give them a real marker, but it was a concept. It was an idea for them to gain confidence on what they're doing and what they can achieve later in the practicum. And also, we have an egg. You're going to ask yourselves, why we're having an egg in this? And this gives us our second case, the egg. The egg is one type of reward that is related with the curiosity motivation, the free spirit, okay? As a general concept, give your students an egg that will hatch if they complete a specific amount of activities. What comes out of it must be something significant for them and could or should be used in the following lesson. I'm going to show you this example. The egg I gave them at the wrap-up of one lesson, and the following lesson, they have a progress bar along with the egg. If they completed tasks in a sequence, the progress bar was going up and up and up. And at some point, the egg will hatch, and what would happen is that something would come out of it. In this case was Will Smith, and some other lesson, it was Bad Bunny, okay? And the thing is that they don't expect to see that. And the curiosity, in order to make the egg hatch, is going to make them complete the task more effectively, all right? And that's about the cases, okay? Those are the tests of motivation. And in general, this is the concept of the research and what we have done in classes, okay? This was carried out in a writing lesson, and now my colleague is gonna tell you about the results and methodology.
Okay, hello. I hope you're very well. Thank you for the invitation. And I'm going to continue with the presentation, but give me just a second to introduce. The research question of our study is, how do university students perceive gamification as a tool to develop academic writing skills in ICETLT? This is the question that actually guided our study, right? In order to, I would say that, not to answer the question, but this question emerged from my colleagues' experience, right, as a teacher, from my experience as well, and also from the literature review, right? So I'm gonna present the literature review. Let me see. I'm not good at games, sorry. Okay, you know that there is overwhelming evidence that gamification has a big impact on language learning, right? For example, we can see here that in a classroom where gamification is taking place, the students have more opportunities to develop their cognitive skills. This is something very important for us teachers of English and students of English as well, because in that way we can learn vocabulary more effectively. Another important reason to use gamification in the classroom is that it promotes problem-solving skills and collaborative learning, especially when they have to solve a problem, they work together in order to solve that problem, right? Let me continue. Okay, but what about writing skills? Because we are interested in writing skills, right? The evidence shows that gamification has a significant impact on the motivation of the students in order to continue writing. So it is very, very effective to use gamification while you are teaching writing skills, especially in our field, which is English language teaching, of course. But in spite of this overwhelming evidence, in Chile we don't have enough studies that focus on the development of writing skills in ICETLT. It is surprising, isn't it? What do you think? Okay, here we go again. So considering this lack of studies, we decided to carry out this research in order to narrow a little bit the gap in terms of, in practical terms and also in theoretical terms, right? So now I'm going to show you the methodology that we used regarding the sampling. We recruited 3 participants who are students of the university. They are studying to be a teacher of English, as many of you, I think, right? And the average age is 22 years old, and the 3 female students and 1 male student participate in this study, right? Okay, they had already had a gamification in the academic writing subject that they had taken. Regarding the methodology and the data collection, we can see that we use a narrative approach, right? Probably you might be wondering why narrative approach, because in that way we can get rich data from our students. This is why we decided to use narrative approach, right? And we also use semi-structured interviews, right, for the same reason, to get rich data from our participants. The semi-structured interview allows the students to tell their stories. We are very interested in what the students consider in terms of gamification, right? And finally, when we had all the data, we transcribed the data, of course, and then we analyzed the thematically, right? So this was the process of data collection and also methodology. Okay, I'm sorry. Let's continue. But what about the preliminary results? Because we are in the middle, we haven't finished yet, but we found interesting things so far, right? The first thing is motivation and engagement. This is not surprising because, as you know, as I said previously, gamification has a significant impact on motivation. This is not a surprise, right? The second theme is, which can be a little bit more surprising, is feedback and revision. And the participants reported receiving more frequent and timely feedback on their writing when it was gamified and felt more motivated to revise and improve their work as a result. So this is something very, very important because the students don't have to, I don't know, wait until the teacher has the time to provide feedback, right? They receive feedback immediately. And that has a significant impact on their learning experience as I would say, teacher of English, but I would say that they are students of English, right? And then writing skills development, that would be the third theme. Gamification contributed to students' development of writing skills, such as grammar, vocabulary, and organization, all right? But I'm gonna show you now what the students say about these themes, right? For example, regarding motivation and engagement, one of the students, one of the participants said, I used to feel extremely anxious. I think that probably most teachers are probably picturing what they do in the classroom, right? I used to feel extremely anxious about writing assignments, but when the word turned into a game, it felt like a challenge and I wanted to take it on, right? So it was really motivating for them. Another participant reported, the game elements made writing more fun and enjoyable, and I was more willing to put in the effort to do it well, right? So can you see that it is really important to use gamification in order to enhance motivation, especially in writing, in the development of writing skills, right? Regarding the second theme, which was feedback and what was it? Oh, I forgot the first one. Sorry? And revision, right? Sorry. In the game, I would get feedback on my writing right away, and it was really helpful to know what I was doing well and what I needed to improve, something which is important, right? And another participant mentioned this, because the game gave me the points for revising my work, I was more willing to take the time to make changes and try to improve my score, right? Okay, let's move on then to the next theme, the development of writing skills. Here, there is something very interesting, because you will see that probably language acquisition is here, okay? We haven't really mentioned this, but we are suspecting that there is something related to language acquisition, which is the main aim of a teacher of English, right, with their students. Gamification has helped me to improve my vocabulary and grammar, right? At the beginning, I thought that I didn't learn. This is where probably language acquisition was taking place, right? But when I had to take a test, I remembered everything, all right? Surprising, right? Wasn't it? And another participant said the following: gamification has helped me to organize and focus on the writing tasks. I improved my skills. I think that gamification helps students to internalize new information beyond memorizing it just because they are going to take a test. They internalize it and it stays there. So I'm quite sure that in one way or another, language acquisition is taking place there, right? Let's continue. There are some challenges and limitations that we have to admit. All right, one of the limitations is the sample size. Let's remember that we recruited just four participants, so probably the results or the findings will not be generalizable to a wider population, right? Probably these results is going to be just valid for that group of students, right? And another problem, or not problem, limitation, I would say, is that as we use a narrative methodology, probably the interpretations that we gave to the data, right, are in one way or another affected by our own convictions as teachers and researchers as well. And finally, the scope, we only focus on writing skills, but other skills, for example, speaking and listening, were not considered for this piece of research, right? Okay, the implications and recommendations. The findings suggest that gamification can be a valuable tool, right, for increasing the students' interest in academic writing. This is something that it is clear, right? But as my colleague said before, gamification in itself is not actually a panacea, right? It is not a magic wand. It helps, but the teacher has to play his or her role actively. So the teacher has to provide feedback and provide opportunities to practice, right? So the teacher has a key role there. And for future research, we suggest exploring the use of gamification in other areas of ELT and expand the scope of the existing research, all right? And now, I'm gonna share with you the references. And I don't know whether you have any questions. We are willing to answer questions. And thank you very much. I will invite my colleague.
Hello. Yep.
Have we got any questions? All right.
Hello.
Hello.
Well, it was a very interesting participation, but maybe I misunderstood some details, because you were showing some daily mission tickets on paper. Were you using a platform for this kind of activity?
Yeah, they were like actually cut out from the presentation slide that I used for the lesson. So what you see here is part of the slide that I used. So it wasn't a paper sheet. It was part of the slide that I used. So what I did was that I included in the, let's say, third or second slide from my presentation in the class, I included the objective first, and then right after that, I included daily missions with 3 or 4 daily missions per day. That's it. So in here, I use this. First, the objective, we're going to describe, we're going to create arguments for defending abortion, for example, all right? And after that, I included daily missions with, let's say, first we're going to speak only English during the day, then I want you to write at least 3 sentences, and finally I want you to blah, blah, blah. Okay? That's what I did. Okay? This is not a paper thing. It was part of the presentation.
Okay, so it was, but it's not a platform.
No, it's just PowerPoint. It's
Okay.
just that.
Okay, then.
Okay.
So 2 more questions.
Yeah,
Sorry.
please.
Why only 4 participants, and how do you see this working with a 30+ students classroom?
I'm going to answer the first one first. We included only 4 because we were starting the research, okay? We had many data to collect because this has been applied to not only writing courses, but also linguistic courses. It was applied to grammar courses. I applied it to an adult school night program that I had. So it's been applied in many different in many different contexts. So we decided to use it only in the writing course, and we started with 4 students because we wanted specific students with specific characteristics. Some of them were gamers, okay, like old-time gamers. And 2 of them, they haven't played the game at all. So we decided with 2 and 2 to see how the preliminary results turned out. So that's why you see only 4. But the idea is to expand this research. Okay, we haven't finished it yet. That's the point. Okay, and what was the second question? Sorry.
It's just because in many of the comments they reported, you mentioned that they said that they received feedback many times and more often. And so if this is not a platform and you have to do it yourself, how do you see this going or working on a 30+ classroom?
That's very interesting, and my answer is I try to encourage autonomy. The missions were there so that students can know what they have to do. Okay, so as I told you, what you see here, it's only a small amount of the missions that I gave to my students during the class. So they knew that they had to create, for example, topic sentences and 3 or 4 supporting sentences, and include 1 concluding sentence in the paragraph, so they could check whether what they're doing was correct or not. Okay, so they received immediate feedback in the sense that they could check what they were doing. Actually, if you take a look at, for example, Longman textbooks, you're going to find at the end of the book, you're going to find that they have actually checklists to see your progress. You can turn that into missions, okay? And if you do that, your students are going to receive immediate feedback from themselves. But the thing is that you have to teach that first, because your students are not going to do that by themselves if you don't teach them to do that. That's our job as teachers. That's it. Did I answer?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes,
because can I add something meanwhile? Sorry? Can I add something meanwhile? I'm referring to the number of students, just 4. You know that in this type of studies, the number of students is always, I would say, a few students, yes? Because we want to get rich information, right? Because this is most significant for us. It is not a quantitative study because you need a larger number of students or participants in order to generalize the results. In our case, we're not interested in generalizing the studies, but we want to know from the students themselves what it means for them to participate in a class which has been, I would say, gamified, right? This is one of the main reasons why we use so far for students. All right? Thank you.
Okay, Marcela.
Yes. First of all, thank you for your presentation. It's very interesting. As teacher, I think it gives us really good ideas to implement in the class. That's the idea, to bring more ideas. And my question is, first of all, these examples you were giving, for me, I think it was more aimed for young learners. but the investigation was carried out with 22 years old students in a major. So the first question is, do you have an example of what activities you use with the 22 years old students? And the second one, when you apply this into a classroom of young learners, how do you take out the competitiveness of the classroom? You know that kids are like, oh, I have this amount of stickers or this, and you have none. So how will you suggest to take out that part of the competition in classroom?
Thank you very much for your question. Yes, actually, I think that the purpose of this research, among many things, is to encourage the use of a game-based approach for teaching. Okay. Now, regarding the first question, I can just to my mind, I remember an exercise that we did in writing course in the preparation of an argumentative essay. The activity that we did was that we played a little game called the Werewolf. Do you know it? Yeah. Does any of you know it? Don't worry, because have you played Among Us? Yes. Yes, of course you have. Among Us is a hidden role game. Okay. The idea is that some of you are evil, say evil, and the others are not, and you have to discover the ones that are evil. In class, we were teaching arguments and counter-arguments, and we played that game in order to, if you accuse someone, you have to give an argument, and the one that's accused, he has to use counter-arguments to defend himself. All right, that's an idea. I mean, there are plenty of activities that we have with the gamified approach.
Sure.
Yeah.
So the thing is that we have to keep in mind that you need to find games or ideas of a game that are aligned with the age and the motivation of the class.
Yes, that's it. I think the second thing you said is more appropriate. You have to find things or games or activities that are aligned with the type of motivation that your students have. Because if your students are not curious all the time, or they're very shy or too shy, that type of activity is not going to work. Okay. So the first thing is to make a little research in your class to see what's the most common type of motivation among your students. And that's it. What was your second question, sorry?
How you take out the part of the competition in classroom?
Competition is a game mechanic. You can add it, or you can. It's not necessary that you add it. In my lessons, most of the times we work on a collaborative basis. If one student unlocks all the missions or completes all the missions, the reward is shown to everyone. Okay, so we're not really competing to achieve the goal, but we're collaborating in order to do it. Okay, but if you want to add a little competence in your class, that's not bad. I mean, as long as it's not aggressive and it's not too violent, that's fine. All right.
Thank you so much.
That's it.
Okay, thank you, Sebastián and Victor. Thank you very much for this interesting presentation. Okay, let's continue. Our next presentation is called EFL Teachers' Attitudes Towards Incorporating Technology in Language Teaching, Challenges and Opportunities. It is in charge of Dr. Candy Veas Faundes. Here it is. She's a practitioner with more than 20 years of experience teaching English as a foreign language. She holds a Master of Arts degree in TESOL from the University of Minnesota and a PhD in Education from Universidad de Almería. She is a full-time professor at the Faculty of Humanities at Universidad de Playa Ancha, and currently her professional and academic experiences are mainly focused on advising teachers at graduate and undergraduate levels in action research initiatives. Her research interests include methodology for inclusion in language learning, technology in language teaching, and second language teacher education. Okay, Candy, you're very welcome.
I'm up. Thank you. Thank you for that nice presentation. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm glad to see you here, and I'm thankful for you having me. As you already heard, my name is Candy Veas Faundes, and I come from Valparaíso. And today I'm here to talk to you about our latest investigation, which I have conducted with Professor Roxana Rebolledo from the same university. And we wanted to investigate the attitudes of EFL teachers towards incorporating technology in language teaching. And the reason why we say challenges and opportunities, it's because after we conducted the study, this is what we really found, a lot of challenges, but most of the challenges that we identified can also be construed as opportunities for the future. So let me begin with a brief outline of the presentation. I'm going to give you a little bit of information, contextual information about the particular study. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about our main analytical tool, which was the technology adoption model. And then I'll tell you a little bit more about our study, the results, discussion, and conclusion. To start with, it's important to highlight the relevance that instructors' attitudes have on the acceptance of new technology. And this has been studied for a very long time, and we know that there is a direct link between positive attitudes toward a certain technology and the later adoption of that technology. And that's why we focus our study on the notion of attitudes. And in order to do this, we are using the technology adoption model, which is a very old model. Actually, it was first proposed in 1989 by Davis, and it has been used for many different disciplines to study this issue of technology adoption. And because, as Davis proposed, it's used to determining the reasons for people's adoption of technology. And in the original version, Davis proposed or established two core variables which comprise the basis of the model, which are perceived ease of use and perceived usefulness. And these two core variables are impacted by a set of external variables that trigger these perceptions. So that's kind of the basic premise of the model that we used. Now, later on, the technology adoption model has been later developed, and now we understand a little bit more about internal and external factors that may have an impact on those two core variables. And some of them, which I think are very relevant for the investigation that we conducted, are, for example, the notion of self-efficacy, which means how much people believe in their own ability to do something. Subjective norm, which is what people believe that other people believe about using whatever it is that we're talking about, the idea or object of our attitude. Enjoyment, it's going to have an important influence on your adoption or not, or rejection of something. And in the case of technology, it has been found that the notion of objective usability, it sounds pretty obvious, it's going to have an impact. And the facilitating conditions, which is also quite obvious if we think about the issues with technology. So these are some of the internal and external factors that take part in the technology adoption model. Now, in our study, we wanted to investigate the attitudes of a group of foreign language instructors who were implementing a new learning management system, which was specifically designed and created for language learning. Now, we used a mixed methods approach, which I'm going to explain in a few minutes. And the main question that we had was, what are their attitudes towards the implementation of this new LMS in this particular context? And also, we wanted to know what external or internal factors contributed to their attitudes in the particular context that we studied. Now, what is the context? The context is a university, a mid-sized university in Chile, And the participants of the study were 17 instructors, 15 English teachers, and 2 German teachers, who were in charge of implementing this new LMS for language learning. And the particular LMS that I'm talking about is one that has a set of language activities classified into the 5 first levels of the Common European Framework. And it's from a Canadian-based company. And I'm going to show you a little bit more of the visual of the particular platform that we called it the platform. This is the teacher's dashboard interface. And as you can see, there are 2 columns. On the right-hand side, you see all of the available materials that the teachers can have access to. And on the left-hand side, you see what the teachers, using a drag and drop procedure, make available for students. So each one of the levels, in this case I'm showing you a little bit of A1 level, but each level is divided into folders related to the different aspects of language learning. As for example, in this case we can see the section about vocabulary, but there was also a folder with exercises about grammar, another one related to listening comprehension, reading comprehension, and speaking. And I would say that one of the most innovative features about this particular platform was the speaking part, because it has an algorithm that is able to record students when they attempt to pronounce certain sentences given by the same system. And then they immediately produce a score for students to know how much they resemble the pronunciation of the model. So that's probably the rest. If you have ever worked with an LMS, with some kind of platform for language learning, it's probably very similar to what you've seen. You know, like completion exercises, listening and multiple choice exercises. But the good thing about it, and the reason why these teachers decided to implement this platform, was because it produces score reports for each student, which also gives you some information about the amount of time that they've been working on the platform. So that was kind of the situation. We found ourselves into this with my colleague. We were part of the faculty, and we were involved in a way in the decision to actually put this into effect. So we decided to see what was going to happen. And so the instruments that we used were a written questionnaire, which involved some questions about the demographics, just a few. We asked about the years of experience and if they had had experience with a similar resource before. Then the TAM survey, the Technology Adoption Model Survey, and then an open-ended question which allowed us to collect lots of qualitative information, which later informed the questions in our interviews, because we decided to interview a subset of teachers after the first part of data collection. Now, talking about the TAM survey, we feel that this is a very powerful tool, analytical tool, to understand the adoption of new technology in any discipline, actually, not only on teaching, but it's been used across disciplines. And in our particular survey, we decided to use the two core variables from Davis, which were ease of use and usefulness, but we also included the variable about enjoyment. And we decided to do this because it has been identified as an influential factor for the adoption of new technology, so if people find it fun. then it's more likely that they will adopt it. And also because this had been one of the arguments from the same faculty to choose this particular LMS. So we wanted to check if it was actually as enjoyable as they expected it to be. And we checked our survey with a few expert investigators to check each one of the items in our survey, because our survey was a 15 items survey, 5 items per each one of the variables. Each of the items, each of the statements was a positive statement about the variable. And our participants had to react with a 5-point Likert scale from number 1, which meant completely disagree, to number 5, which meant completely agree with the positive statement. Remember that because it will be relevant for the results. Now, we cross-examined the general attitude results with some of the demographic variables that we had, but we had a very small sample of teachers, so it was only 17. It was not statistically significant to be generalized at all, but we still wanted to check if there were any demographic variables that would affect the attitudes in this particular context. And also, we used that information to connect to internal and external factors affecting the participants' attitudes, which we obtained from the qualitative data, which we analyzed using content analysis procedures. And so we obtained a lot of interesting comments. We separated comments into themes, and we put them into nice charts later on. We count them. We were able to order them in the, from the most commented topic to the least commented topic, and we also established its orientation, because that was also the important question that we wanted to answer. All right, so let's look at the quantitative results first. And well, the reason why we used mixed methods, it's because numbers say something, but they don't really say much about the reasons why this is so. And what is important to remember here is that with our 15-item survey, the maximum possible score was 75, which means that the media, being 43.18, is quite low, so it's quite under the possible maximum score. The other thing that I could tell you about this, because I didn't want to show you so many numbers, but it's that most of the scores were under 60. So all of this information just tells us preliminary that we can see their attitudes were not very positive. So they did not agree with the statements that we proposed in the survey. And another result that we can observe on the chart right now is, well, just one of the comparisons that we made of medias and some of the demographic characteristics. And what we really found here is that there were no differences in these negative or somewhat negative attitudes towards the LMS that were affected by the range of their years of experience. Because something that I forgot to tell you is that these were a group of very experienced teachers. Some of them had from 10 to 14 years, some of them had from 15 to 20 years of experience, and a couple of them had more than 21 years of experience. So we're talking about people who are set in their ways, who know how they like to teach, know what they like and what they don't like. And so we are very confident that they were very honest in the way that they answered to the survey and then later on to our questions in the interview. And as you can see, there are no, I mean, the medias are not very far away from each other. They are low and they are around 40 points. Now, maybe more interesting for the investigation are the classification of the comments that we found in both of our qualitative data gatherings. And we have ordered these topics in this chart from the most commented topic to the least commented one. And we have also established the orientation of the comment. So on the first column, you can see the number of positive comments about the theme, and on the third column, you can find the negative comments about the theme. So one of the most commented and most negative aspect of the implementation of this LMS was the program of contents. And something that I didn't tell you, that I forgot to tell you, but I was going to tell you now, is that these were a group of general English teachers who teach different majors, different undergraduate programs at this mid-sized university. So they have different needs in terms of materials. And before they decided to implement this LMS, they all had to do whatever they could with their own resources. And they didn't have one type of material for everybody the same. And they thought that that was a disadvantage. So that's why they decided to implement this. But then, when they actually used it for a couple of semesters, they had a lot of negative comments about the program of contents of the LMS that they themselves had chosen. So I think this is a very interesting finding because it might, you know, for somebody who's been in the field and who's reflected about the importance of materials and materials being connected to students' needs, it would have sounded counterintuitive to choose the same materials for everybody. But they wanted to try it, they tried it, and they discovered that they didn't like it because it was too restricted, it was too limited to their needs. The second most commented topic was the issue of functionality. And as you can see here, the comments were also quite high in terms of the negative side. There were a lot of functionality problems with this LMS, and that ranged from problems with connectivity to issues for connecting to the platform using a password, which students tend to forget, and then teachers were in charge of enrolling students, and a lot of functionality issues are rather technical, but also some other issues with the actual language learning abilities of the LMS. So those were the two most commented topics. And then we have all of these, I would say, are interesting to discuss, but I don't have the time. But I see them as, even these two topics, program of contents and functionality, I see them as challenges in this case, but also opportunities for us to reflect on what is needed for a technology to actually be adopted and be useful for us in our classes. So we found that two of the aspects that were also important in shaping these teachers' opinions about the platform were two notions, that of learner autonomy and that of self-efficacy. So learner autonomy was one of the most positive aspects of implementing the LMS. Teachers considered that this was a good opportunity to develop learner autonomy. But on the other hand, the notion of self-efficacy, which, as I said before, has to do with how much you believe you can do something, was really affected by the functionality problems of the platform on the teacher's part and on the student's part. So the teachers were frustrated because they had problems with the issues in the platform, and the students were frustrated because of the same reason. So that's kind of an important issue that we need to take into account. And one of the comments that the teacher, one of the participants made about this was many students who were good at English, who I assumed were going to use the platform, did not use it because they told me that they completed exercises and the system evaluated them wrong. So this was an issue with the functionality of the LMS, which was case sensitive. So answers had to be exactly in the case that was supposed to be. So if there was a capital letter in one of the answers, it was wrong. And the other issue was related to the pronunciation. The pronunciation evaluated students with a very low score if they did not resemble the model exactly as it was expected. So all of those issues affected students' self-efficacy in this case. Another result, or something else that we can conclude, is that the technology adoption model can be a predictor of users' acceptance of new technology, because we were actually able to establish these, to understand the factors behind these negative results that we obtained with the survey as we understood the comments that the students made. So we were able to make the connection between the quantitative and the quantitative data. But of course, this is such a small number of participants. We're not making any generalizations. We're just presenting this as a case study for us to begin our process of reflection on the topic of technology adoption and what it entitles. And one of the results or conclusions that we make is that definitely these instructors did not find this LMS easy to use. It was definitely not easy for them, and they mentioned not easy friendly many times during our investigation. And to conclude, I think, we think, my co-investigator and I, we think that we should use a model like TAM to investigate the technology adoption, because it's a good analytical model to help explain the factors that influence the adoption or rejection of these new resources. And we also understood better the impact of internal factors such as subjective norm and self-efficacy. Subjective norm, remember, is what you think others think about the particular technology. So in this case, since this was something that was decided by a group of teachers, this may have been a reason why they felt a little bit forced to choosing this or using this, because they thought, oh, this is what everybody's doing, everybody thinks this is good, so I'm gonna do it too. So these are just reflective thoughts that I think should guide our future adoption of technologies in our classrooms. And finally, we believe that efforts need to be made to help language teachers to clearly deconstruct, unpack, and reflect upon their own instructional principles, and thus have them participate in the process of selection of materials in a more involved way, or in a better informed way, helping them choose the materials that may be most appropriate for their own beliefs and style of teaching. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. It was wonderful, so I couldn't stop myself from asking this time. So my question goes into the enjoyment part. I saw on one side that there was only a couple of students who said that it was enjoyable. Mm-hmm. And I wonder, if you could be able to get answers from that was from the questionnaire, but as far as I remember, there was another type of instrument to let you into more deeply questions. But I don't remember if you mentioned that at the beginning, but if that's the case, Was there a way of, finding out if students really enjoy that or not at all?
Actually, yes, because there were two parts to this investigation. I'm just talking about the teachers' attitudes, but we also conducted the same kind of study with students. And, but I'm not talking about that here because I came here to talk about teachers and the teachers' attitudes towards it. But the students' attitudes did not differ from the teachers because of the same reasons that we can see on the classification of comments. They had similar issues with the program of contents and the functionality of the platform. And the thing is that this platform was offered to the faculty as a way of standardizing the materials and also as a way of having materials available in all of the CEFR levels. So it was quite enticing to try and see, if our teaching was actually matching the levels that we were supposed to be teaching. And I think that in terms of the levels, it was okay, but the problem was the topics, because nobody found that the topics were interesting. And actually, an example that comes to mind is like the typical first unit in a book in which they present to you the native speaker. And it's like, this is so-and-so from Canada, and this is his life or her life. And so I remember, and now that you ask me, I remember somebody telling me, one of the students saying, who cares? Who cares? Exactly. So that was kind of the reason why I think students didn't like it, apart from the functionality problems. Because if they were evaluated wrong when they felt that they were doing it right, and that's another thing, there was a model which was used in artificial intelligence, which expected pronunciation exactly as the native speaker. So there was no room for what my colleague was talking a few minutes before about, the variety, seeing learners as speakers of the language, appropriation, and all of those nice things that we see so far away sometimes.
It makes sense.
All right.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, we don't have any more time for questions. I'm sorry. Thank you. Such interesting topics and interesting things to reflect on for our teaching practices. Thank you, Candy. All right, so it is my pleasure now to introduce Cassidy Kelly, one of our teachers, one of our very own teachers here at Dirección de Formación General. She is an EFL professor who has been working with us at Universidad Católica del Maule for quite a while now. She's originally from York, Pennsylvania, in the United States, and graduated from the University of Bloomsburg in Pennsylvania. She's in the process now of completing her master's degree in applied linguistics for teaching and learning English here at UCM as well. So she has been part of the Dirección de Formación General since 2019 and currently specializes in an English for specific purposes teaching approach across a variety of majors at our institution. Cassidy also implemented an English community outreach program for adults as well as specific projects to foster English language learning in students from preschool to 12th grade in 5 public schools while overseeing the foreign language program in the rural community of Licantén for many years. Her topic today is promoting collaborative learning through technology. Let's welcome Cassidy.
Thank you very much, Rosanna. let me connect here and then we'll get started. Yeah. Okay. Got it. All right. I think so. If I talk into this, yes? Okay. There you can hear me. So as Rosanna mentioned, I am a professor here at the UCM. I work with our Department of Formación General, especially right now with an ESP strategy. So what I'm going to be presenting today, really I want more to open up a little bit of a conversation as far as promoting collaborative learning through technology. So I am going to ask for your participation throughout my presentation. In order to get started here, first, I'd like to say that while I am presenting, since I am using Canva here, we are going to, so I'm going to use this feature that Canva has, which is their live chat option. So if you open up in your browser that canva.live link and enter with this code, this is going to be a chat that will be open as I'm speaking. And any of your questions, please leave them here. That way at the end, I can address them quickly as we're going. I'll give you a second to go ahead and get in there. Again. Does it work? Maybe. All right, we have somebody who's been able to connect. So is it okay if I hide this and we can keep going? Awesome. All right, just keep that in mind throughout the presentation. Any thoughts that you have, comments, or questions, go ahead and leave them there. That way I can address them afterwards. So first things first, we are going to introduce this topic with an app that I'm sure most of us are very familiar with Mentimeter. I'd like you here to enter using the QR code that is down here at the bottom. So we are going to do a 2 truths and a lie introduction about technology related to collaborative learning. So I have 3 statements here, and I'd like you to decide which one you think is the lie. So the first one says technology can't replace a teacher's role in facilitating collaboration. Second one says that technology eliminates the need for face-to-face interaction in collaborative activities. And the third, that technology breaks down conventional barriers of time and space when we talk about collaboration. So let's get an idea kind of what you think. Once you select your options, you can send it, and we'll start to see exactly here what some of your ideas are. While we're doing this, I'd also like to comment that this presentation, my focus, I know that we, as teachers, especially since the pandemic, we have learned a lot about many different applications, many different digital resources. So my idea here, rather than trying to show you new sources, is kind of to think about in what ways can we use the resources that we're already familiar with in the most effective way in our classroom. So I have some answers here. Let's give it like 1 more minute. Are you ready to get started? Are you ready? Awesome. All right, so the majority of you said that number 2 would be the lie, correct? So let me show you our answers. Of course, technology is the lie, right? Technology is the lie. Number 2 is the lie. So technology while there are other instances where we can collaborate without that face-to-face interaction, that doesn't mean that we're going to completely eliminate the need for in-class interaction, even though we're using these kind of platforms. So I'm going to continue here with what we're talking. So why do we talk about collaborative learning in general? There we go, sort of, there we go. All right, so why do we talk about collaborative learning in general? I'm sure this is a strategy that many of you are familiar with, but some of the benefits, just analyzing, of course, this is a very short summary. We're going to promote active learning through collaborative learning and more of that student-centered approach that I think a lot of us in an ideal world want to use, but sometimes it's a little difficult to put into practice, right? We also want our students to develop interpersonal skills such as communication, problem solving, negotiation, teamwork, etc. And the idea, especially at the level that we work at here at the university, is that we're not only preparing students in an academic setting, but hopefully for their professional setting as well. This also fosters the ability for different perspectives, not only perspectives from us as teachers, but from students to share their own ideas and promote that critical thinking aspect in the classroom. Considering all of this, why should we incorporate technology into collaborative learning? Because of course there are collaborative activities that we can do without technology, but when we think about technology, we add some very specific benefits that sometimes in the classroom, that I would rather say that extend beyond the classroom. So there is more accessibility and flexibility as it comes to group collaboration that could be asynchronous, synchronous work, it's synchronous, asynchronous, I think. Work, our flexibility in time that students can collaborate on their projects. We also have diverse communication options, video conferencing, chat, comments, etc. We can also promote this efficient workflow that not only, as I said, is something that we can use in the classroom, but hopefully these are skills that our students will carry on after they finish their education and enter the professional world as well. As far as technology goes, we think about the engagement of our students. Of course, many times we talk about the fight against cell phones, correct? And the idea is that we incorporate these new technologies to give fresh ideas, something different in the classroom, hopefully that our students are interested in learning about, and that it presents a different challenge as well. There are also more options for peer feedback when we consider these technological resources that we have, and we can also promote creativity through them as well. So, talking about all of this, there are many ideas, right, that sound great, but how do we actually put this into practice? When we think about collaborative learning, I think typically the very first thing we say, okay, our students are going to do a group presentation, right? And they're going to work collaboratively. Maybe they say each person does their part and they show up the day of the presentation, correct? But I think that we should think about these opportunities in other instances during our classes as well. So there are small moments during our classes where we can promote this collaborative approach, such as at the beginning, brainstorming. If we're going to introduce a new idea, that our students kind of start to get an idea of some vocabulary topics, etc. Also, think about this could be a way to introduce new vocabulary, grammar practice as well. Task organization and checklists, of course, is another way that we can use it in class. And our typical create presentations, virtual meetings, etc. So something more concrete, I'd like to show you an activity that I have actually used in my classes this year. So the objective of this activity, this was something that I was starting a new unit. So I wanted to familiarize students with new vocabulary related to the workplace and create useful material for self-study at the same time. So my students, when I applied this, they're first-year English students who are studying geology. And the unit we were working on is called The Workplace. So while we worked on that, if my link is going to open, there, perfect. So this is actually work that my students did. I assigned them each a workplace. I gave them a card here in Jamboard, and I assigned them each a workplace. This card was blank, and it just had, for example, environmental agency. We were talking about what kinds of workplaces potentially could these students work in as professionals, as geologists, right? The idea was that the assignment that I gave them was to define their workplace in English, of course, and to provide an example as well as visuals that supported what it was. Each group, I worked with groups of about 3 or 4 students. Each group created one of these cards, and then afterwards, this was something that I uploaded to our LMS system that we have here in the ICETLT here in our university. And the idea was that as students were studying these terms, they could go back through and see what other work their classmates had done in order to remember the terms as well. So for some other examples that I have here, so we talked about, I have 2 microphones, sorry. So of course, sometimes they're a little interesting, a little funny, but the idea is that these could be things that stick in the minds of our students as well. So maybe they might go, oh, haha, somebody drew pronto copec, right? But are they going to remember that vocabulary word that has to do with petroleum company? Most likely. Some other examples here, just to give you kind of an idea. Of course, we have students, some students go a little bit further, some students are a little more creative, some think that it's a little funny, right? But this is kind of the general idea, right? And in these kinds of activities, the idea is not only that in the moment they're studying something specific, that also it leaves this resource for the rest of their classmates as well. That's not it. There we go. All right. Awesome. So of course, we have to talk about our educational context, right? So I am working here in the context of university students who have access to internet, to their devices. They can, et cetera, et cetera. But we think about other contexts where students may not have the same access to these resources, or we talk about classroom management when we're working with younger students. So the question that I am actually going to kind of turn around on you guys is if you consider your own educational context, such as students' ages, class size, access to technological resources, and any other factors that maybe you look at this and go, well, that's a good idea, but I don't know if that could work in my reality. How do you think you could adapt an activity like this or an activity that would be collaborative work in Google Docs, for example, presentations such as Canva in your context? So, is there anybody who would like to give an opinion?
Well, maybe I was thinking when you said adapt, maybe like if we don't have technology available that day or never, maybe have the students make posters and post them around the classroom, and then, so do something like that, but on a poster, post them on the wall, and then have the whole class be walking around looking at the different posters.
Perfect, awesome, awesome. Anybody else?
I was thinking when you say adapt, also when you have different kind of students in your classroom, students that are shy, students that maybe are more like analytical, someone more creative, that maybe instead of them doing this activity on paper or wherever, you can give them a scramble, and they have to put the things in the correct order. So for them, they also remember where each vocabulary goes.
Perfect.
So that's a way of thinking other skills that students have.
Absolutely, absolutely. Anybody else that would like to comment? No? So like I said, this is just, no? Like I said, this is just one example of many, but we definitely have to take all of this into consideration when thinking about how we can apply these strategies in our classroom. So I would also now like for all of us to collaborate a little bit. So if you could take a moment to scan the QR code. This is going to lead to a Padlet page that I've made that has various categories of types of activities. So what I would like you to do is think in this category if there's any specific digital resource that you have used at some point in time in your classroom that you think works well, and kind of add it to this list. So the idea is that we as a group here create a list of resources that hopefully later in the week, later in the semester, if you're thinking about incorporating something like this into your practice, that you could explore some other ideas. So let's take a moment to scan. And can I show, did everybody scan? Yeah, so I'd like to show you real quick. The Padlet is going to look like this. So as I said, it's organized into, do not want to microphones. As I said, it's organized into some categories. So I added here, for example, Mentimeter as a brainstorming resource. And as I can see, some of you are already adding other things in there. It would be super helpful if when you add your posts, which will show up here in these plus sections, if you could put the name and if you could copy the link. That way we have an idea kind of where we can go to look at some of these resources. I added things that I had mentioned before about introducing new vocabulary and grammar, task organization, checklist, presentations, virtual meetings. And if there's other useful resources, please feel free to add them as well. Maybe put a little bit of context in if they're good resources for gamification, for young learners, for ESP, etc. So please take a minute to kind of add some of your ideas to this. Some of these are things I've seen before. These books, would it be? And Twinkle? Does anybody, who wrote these in here? Could anybody kind of explain what these resources are used for? Look. Mm-hmm. Oh, that's awesome. Wonderful. Fantastic. Gina Lee, we have Google Meets added, Google Slides, Google Docs. We're fans of Google around here. Aha, Slides, wonderful. Kahoot, of course.
Okay, I said that Google Clap is similar to Menti. Yeah, so you can prepare polls, or if you want to ask for a specific concept and you want cloud, a word cloud, and it's very similar to Menti.
That's something else that we could include.
Yeah.
Thank you. Anybody else that would like to comment on things that they added? Awesome. Hi, thank you.
I didn't add it, but because I cannot remember the name, but I don't know if you know a game that you have to print cards that have different QRs, so the students can answer questions showing them, and you can scan them with your phone. So in the case they don't have a phone or something to interact, they can show and mark A, B, C, or D, depending on the position of the card.
I think there might be various, but I've heard of one called Plickers.
That one,
Yeah.
Plickers,
Awesome.
yes.
I added Genially, which is, there are a lot of templates, but it is good to create like escape rooms for our students. And it's time consuming for us, but it's really fun for them, and it's really meaningful for their learning.
What's the name?
Genially, I put it there.
Awesome, thank you. Anybody else that would like to share some ideas that they added? Oh.
Hello. Oh, sorry, can I say it really quick? I have a website, well, no, I don't have it, but I know it, which is called Classcraft, which is a website for following the progress of students, and in there they can create avatars, they can create their own characters for like a medieval fantasy, and in there you can assign badges, you can assign points, and it's sort of gamifying their experience. So, yep, that's about it, if they like the thing. I tried, but I don't have internet in my phone. Sorry.
What was it called?
It's called Classcraft.
Okay, I just want to mention two of the ones that I usually use. One I already added there is the ISL video lessons. They are pretty good and easy to use because you have just quick quizzes for students from a video, and you can create them, or you can edit the ones that are already available. So that is a very good resource. And the other one that I would like to mention is Quizlet. Those are interactive flashcards that you can use not just for studying, but also for games, quizzes, formative and formative activities. So, and many others.
Awesome. So this Padlet resource is actually, we are going to share, sorry, I know you're going to cut me off. So we are going to share at the end here this presentation with you. Am I talking? Yes, I am. Okay. This presentation, I mean, with you. So the Padlet link that you are all working on is going to be available, as well as another resource that we have here from our department that two of our professors wrote some communicative activities for the health field related to ESP strategies as well. So you are going to have these links that you will be able to explore. I really hope that this is something that, that you find useful and that you can kind of apply in your own context. Really quick, some of the comments that I had here. Do you think this cooperative tools can be applied to the reality of public schools, for example? Definitely. So that was kind of where I was going with the context. So I think that we can adapt, maybe use these tools in ways that our students can work offline, and we as teachers can upload it afterwards, that we can share specific links maybe with their parents. I do think that we need to be a little creative, because it doesn't follow the same kind of pattern as what we see at the university level, but I do think that it is adaptable. And do we have any other questions? Nobody else had written them in here, so do you want? Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Cassidy. All right.
I don't know.
So we're running a bit late, so it's time for lunch. We should be back here at 3 o'clock, and there's a panel discussion. So we hope to see you back at 3 o'clock, maybe 5 minutes to 3. Thank you very much for coming, and we'll see you later today.
Thank you.